All right, we touched on it on yesterday's edition of Locked On LSU and a little bit of a transfer portal palooza, but I've recruited our official transfer portal expert, Brian Smith, to break down what's the latest in LSU transfer portal recruiting and some names to keep an eye on. We'll get into that today with Brian Smith.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, well, welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. It is transfer portal season. It is early signing day season. So we're bringing in Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, to break it all down. And all of our recruiting content is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian, appreciate you as always. Before we get into it, who's leaving LSU, who could come to LSU, what have your days looked like since the transfer portal's open? The transfer portal opened on Monday, so we're very early stages. But what does your text message, app on your phone look like these days? Loaded?
About like Brian Kelly's does.
You got two of them?
I used to. I finally condensed to one. That's a sad state of affairs within itself, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Brian, first, before we look at the rest of the landscape of the transfer portal, at the time of recording, LSU only has 4 players in the transfer portal: cornerback LaTerrence Welch, defensive tackle Bryce Langston, and running backs Armani Goodwin and Trey Bradford. I was under the impression, look, those that losing guys like that, it's going to happen. Guys that aren't at the top of the depth chart, guys that are looking for more opportunities for playing time. I'm not concerned. What's your impression of those 4 players as of right now that have entered the transfer portal from LSU?
Well, I mean, the Welch kid is the one that bothers me. He's from Acadiana in Lafayette. He's a corner. He's a kid that everybody recruited. You hate to see the local kid that's from, an hour away not stick it out. But, I mean, it is what it is. Bradford was highly recruited out of Texas. Langston was highly recruited out of Ocala, Florida. But, corner is just different. And obviously LSU's down at that spot anyway. So, and that's why I'm here pretty much, because I didn't even ask you that many questions. I knew what you were going to tell me.
Corners,
yeah.
Secondary corners, defense as a whole. And LaTerrence Welch was really the one that I circled to say that's one that you don't want to lose, just because you need starters and also you need depth. You just need players. You need players that can play the cornerback position. You need to retain as many as you possibly can.
Yes.
But that's why we brought you on here today. Let's talk about some corners. Not only need to be refilling that spot that's left with LaTerrence Welch, you basically need to refill the entire cornerback room for the 3rd year in a row.
This is one of the weirdest things ever, because my entire life, LSU's had, like, before this past season, maybe 2 or 3 years where you went, man, they suck in the secondary. I'm 50. That's a lot of good.
That's what, probably 23, 2020 might be the only years. In the history of LSU football, maybe the only years.
It's weird. But I would say minimum they need 2 more guys from the portal at corner. And that's if Welch is the only defection from the corner room currently in Baton Rouge. Mm-hmm. And they got to get somebody else. I don't know who else they're targeting at the high school and JUCO ranks, but there can't be a rock unturned. It's not about ranking. It's about fit, and they can't lose. Like, bringing in kids is one thing, but they're losing too many kids at this spot. I have no idea why. I don't know their staff, but it's very odd. So without further ado, here are a few of the guys that I expect them. If they haven't called them already, there's something wrong. Okay. I talked to somebody about, I won't name the school or whatever. It's another school in a similar situation, a different position. The kid entered a portal. 3 minutes later, this school contacted him. 3 minutes. I expect LSU. It's ridiculous. was like, oh my God.
Got to work fast these days.
I was like, that's insane. But these are the kids I expect to get the tires kicked at least right off the bat.
Yeah.
Jair Brown, he was a big time recruit. He's from Ohio, from the Cincinnati area. That kid went to Ohio State. It didn't work out. He's only been there like a year. I was surprised, but he had offers from, Bama, Notre Dame, LSU, everybody. Toriano Pride, a kid that's from your neck of the woods, St. Louis. He's a sophomore. He was at Clemson, played some, but never really got it going. He's got 2 years that he can play. That kid can fly. He's going to have several offers. He had all the offers out of high school. Same kind of deal as Jair Brown.
And there was one thing a few things that Brian Kelly wanted to prioritize in the transfer portal and in recruiting. It's connections of some sort, connections to the coaching staff, connections to the state of Louisiana, connections to LSU and the football program itself. Robert Steeples came from a high school in St. Louis. Mekhi Wingo, you saw transfer from Missouri to LSU following Robert Steeples. So you're seeing a lot of, players from that area now coming to LSU. So that at least satisfies one area that Brian Kelly wants to satisfy in the transfer portal, and that's connections.
He's not the biggest guy, but one of the more highly rated kids.
Doesn't matter. Does he have 2 feet and 10 toes?
I'll confirm. His name is Upton Stout. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Upton Stout. He played at Western Kentucky, but he's from Houston, and he played at North Shore, which is arguably the best program in South Texas.
Right.
You can't be too choosy. And I know LSU's used to getting 6'1" corners, but he's a pretty highly rated kid. Somebody you and I talked about off the air, Kansas State. He's got St. Louis ties, I assume. Yep. Will E. He's Kirkwood. I mean, I don't know how long he lived there, but I assumed he's a St. Louis guy, 6'2", 6'3". Played at Kansas State, so he's been at a successful program that gets a lot of high-level coaching. They're underrated. That coaching staff does a great job. And then Jalen Geiger, 6'1" from Kentucky. He's from South Carolina. So not as much a connection, but he is a profile fit. He's been in the SEC. Those are some of the guys at corner. And this is only day 2. There's going to be a few more. And as we get into the bowl practices and all this, consider the following. This is the busiest week of the year, and it's ridiculous for coaches. They have all of the following going on. Recruiting in-homes. You have kids you're trying to scout across the country to fill out your class. You need a couple more guys to finish up on the 20th. JUCO kids, etc. The transfer portal opened yesterday. You're recruiting your own roster.
Yeah.
Wow, let's be really honest. There are coaches out there trying to poach kids to go into the portal off other. Let's not kid ourselves.
They have been poaching. Let's not kid ourselves. Tampering happens.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not be naive.
Yeah, let's not. And there's also the situation where they have bowl practices to prepare for and player exit meetings at the end. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
Coaches, players, staff, etc. So depending on what number you are, literally, with that exit, if it doesn't go well, but you're the last guy in the room that gets it, just however it works, you may go into portal day 3, day 4 instead of day 1, day 2. Or you may stay. You'll hear reports, Sonny Ship or whoever will talk, hey, so-and-so's definitely staying. So it's very random. And to that point, the other guy I want to mention is Kai Stokes. He's another Ohio State kid that hit the portal. He will have a plethora of options. It's still in your realm. It's still a defensive back. He's a safety. So I think I'm safe to talk about him. He's a kid that I would be surprised if LSU didn't try to kick the tires on him as well.
And Brian Kelly did mention, he spoke with the media on Tuesday. He said 10 of 11 or 11 of our 12 defensive starters will be returning next year. And I don't know who that one is, but I've gotten no buzz. I don't know what you've heard, that a player that might not be returning is not named Mason Smith, is not named Mekhi Wingo, is not going to be one of your foundational defensive players, whether it's to the NFL or the transfer portal.
This is something I had a discussion with somebody, and I also heard this on a podcast, and it's true. LSU is one of the few schools that's not in the transfer palooza with the quarterback situation. I think unless you've heard something different, they're going to go with their own guys, correct? Is that a correct assumption?
I have not heard anything different, but I do want to get into that coming up next, because that is a position that I wouldn't hate LSU maybe kicking the tires on, and we'll get into that coming up next. I know that we talk about sports to escape some of the crazy realities of real life, but let's just talk about it. Just you and I talk about it for a minute about preparing for real life. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst time of the year. It's flu season. It's scary. And I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than one of your family members, one of my families, maybe family members, maybe one of your kids. I can't imagine them getting sick while a supply chain issue may keep them from the life saving medication that they need. But thankfully, you will be okay if you get Jace Medical. So, the Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among so many others. I mean, this stuff could happen to any of us at any time. So, visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jacemedical.com and use offer code locked on to get $20 off of your order. Again, that's jacemedical.com, code locked on to get $20 off of your order. Rolling along here on Locked On LSU, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, is with us, breaking down all things transfer portal. One position group that I did want to bring up with you, and that's quarterback. You just mentioned you don't think that LSU is going to get into the portal to get a quarterback, going with their own guys. So that would be Garrett Nussmeier and Ricky Collins coming back for his redshirt freshman year. And then whatever happens on early signing day, that quarterback that they bring in the 2024 class. Why don't you think LSU would be getting a quarterback?
I think Nussmeier is pretty good.
I think he's
So
pretty
where
good
is it?
too. But I'm thinking insurance.
Well, there's all kinds of, we could go hours about this, but
Mhm.
if you don't spend money on a quarterback, you can allocate it for the players on your roster. Hint, he's about 320 and plays defensive tackle. I have a feeling if
Got
he's
it.
coming back,
We'll get into that coming up next.
but that's what I think they're doing.
Mhm.
Why would Mason Smith not go to the NFL? Because he's a second or third round pick just showing up.
Guess because he could
That's
be
my
a
guess.
first round pick after
Now,
another year and a better season.
I'm sure as an LSU fan, you're selling that so hard every day on every post that you can.
Of course. Why
But
go for the second round when you could have that 5th-year option and a couple extra $1 million in the first round?
he's a really good player. If they get him and Wingo back, I assume it's one of the linebackers that's leaving. I forget their names, but there was one of the kids I thought was going to go. But if you have 10
Not
guys
Harold
back,
Perkins.
no, I don't think Harold. He can't. I mean, he's got one more year before he leaves for pros.
Mhm.
I don't think he's going anywhere. But they should be pretty good. They just got to get one of these corners, and then for the love of mankind, can we get somebody to figure out what's going on with some man and zone coverage and not having busts all over the secondary? That's all I ask.
Could we
That's all I
maybe put your best defensive player on the field on third down, perhaps?
That would help.
Could we not nickel out on every single third down? Maybe.
That's terrible defensive mindset. I don't know why he would do that. He would play 70% of the snaps for me. I mean, it's hard to play more than that, really. But yeah, Perkins should be on the field with 3rd and 6.
Perkins should be on the field whenever Harold Perkins should be on the field. But so we did hear from Brian Kelly in his press conference yesterday, and he brought up coaching changes. Of course, that's at the forefront of a lot of the conversations being had with LSU football fans. Is your defense isn't good enough. Your defense possibly cost you a trip to the college football playoff. Your defense completely wasted an elite championship offense. He acknowledged today in his press conference, defense wasn't good enough. And I don't know how you could look at what you saw and say, yeah, that was good enough. That was acceptable, because it's not acceptable. Brian Kelly said they will evaluate the coaching staff after the bowl game. So, I mean, That's coach speak for if we're going to fire someone, we're going to do it after the bowl game. From a recruiting perspective, a transfer portal perspective, what do you think about the timing on that?
Here's the problem that he's in, and I'm by no means a Kelly apologist, as you're well aware.
Mm.
It's the background check stuff. Yeah, that would be the biggest problem, and they don't want to do it in the middle of bowl prep because that guy, whoever it is, isn't going to take over. They've never been able to figure out how to do the coaching change carousel. Not at the recruiting signing date. That doesn't help either.
Yeah.
But that goes both ways because kids know.
Yeah.
Chances of Matt House being back next year about the chances of you not having long blonde hair. I mean, he's just, it is what it is. So who's it going to be? I mean, if you could argue in terms of assistant coaching jobs in college football, name one that's better than the DC at LSU. Name one.
Maybe the DC at Texas A&M.
Well, right now, but they're losing about everybody.
Yeah.
But they're losing about everybody. LSU's in a situation where traditionally they got a ton of talent. They're going to have a ton of talent next year. It's easy to recruit there. They should be able to get a good guy. But Kelly should have got one last time, and he failed.
Yeah.
He can't miss 2 in a row or else he's going to be in a hot seat. So there we are.
The timing concerns me for 2 reasons. One, your coaching pool starts to shrink. When other head coaches out there start to fill their DC roles. The other thing that concerns me about the timing on that is these players want to figure out where they're going to go. Early signing day is coming up in less than a month. I think defensive players across the country want to know who is going to be coaching me, who is going to be coordinating the defense. Just feels like you're getting a little bit too close for comfort to some deadlines to still have your DC position up in the air.
What is said publicly and what happens behind the scenes.
2 different things.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he knows, but again, it takes 2-3 weeks to go through these hiring processes. And LSU is a state institution. They got to go through the state. He probably knows it's 1 of 2 guys, give or take, right now, and they can tell recruits that. They just can't, legally, he can't do anything else. It's the biggest sham there is, but there are a couple of schools that have fired guys and hired them, knew somebody new within a couple of days. That didn't really happen in a couple of days.
Just like when a player enters the transfer portal and the next day he's already committed to another school.
Correct.
But you tell me that happened overnight?
Yeah. I mean, that usually happens over months. They're talking to other schools while their season's going. That's the new thing. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's the same with coaches. That's been going on for decades. They know when they're leaving. They're ready to leave one spot and they go to another. But yeah, I would imagine Brian, he's always been pretty good about keeping a circle of coaches that he's interested in. And he's got a unique staff now with Louisiana ties. It could be a lot of guys from a lot of spots. It could be somebody from the Saints. It could be all kinds of things. You never know. But it can't be much worse than what happened this year.
Don't say that too loud because I said that after 2020 and I stood corrected after this season. All right, coming up next, a couple specific players in the transfer portal. Could they be possible candidates for LSU in the transfer portal? We'll get into that coming up next with Brian Smith. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. If you're a Saints fan like I am, I'm just going to go ahead and say, and if you're going to bet on a money line, maybe bet against the New Orleans Saints. It's been brutal the past couple of weeks. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. Again, that's FanDuel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Rolling along here on Locked On LSU, Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, is with us. And of course, all of our Locked On recruiting coverage is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. So that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. The biggest name in transfer portal, you know what I am about to say, Walter Nolen. the number one player in the 2022 class, defensive lineman, but at Texas A&M the last 2 years, has started in every single game that he has played, 22 of 22. He is a monster. He is massive. He is quick, and he is damn good. He's entered the transfer portal. What's the latest that you've heard on Walter Nolen? And is LSU a probable landing spot? I'm not optimistic, I'll be honest with you.
It's one of the schools on the short list, but it always was. I don't know if he would come if both those guys come back, being Mackay and Mason. Yeah, I would assume one of them would have to leave. Yeah, I would. Walter's not going to sit the bench.
Right.
So it depends on who leaves. That would be my first thing. But I'm sure they're going to – you got to try. I mean, he's going to be a top 10 pick conservatively. So, yeah. I would imagine that they're going to go after him. Part of the reason that I brought up the question about the quarterback and the money, again, this is another guy. His family, they're looking for NIL.
Not cheap.
No, that ain't going to be cheap. So, and he's going to really put the effort in this next year because he has a chance to go in the top 5. He's that rare guy as an interior player that can rush the passer, much like Mason.
Right.
So, if you put both of those guys in there and you're mixing in Wingo, I mean, it'd be the best 1, 2, 3 I've ever seen, arguably. So, yeah, I mean, you got to try. But Oregon and Alabama and Georgia, Tennessee, where he's from, Tennessee, most people would pick them because that's the easy pick. But, like, what's Tennessee got going for him? I think Georgia or Alabama is more likely the more I think about it because I just don't think he wants to go somewhere and go 8-4 again, 7-5. So,
I have wondered the likelihood of him not transferring at all. You know, I understand a player like that wanting to transfer after all of the turmoil over the last couple of years at A&M, but Elko is a brilliant defensive mind. He's now your head coach. He's going to bring in some of the best defensive coaches in the country.
That's true. He told his dad, though, that he wanted to transfer. He's 20 years old. I have no idea how much that'll stick. I'm sure A&M will offer him an NIL package too, but these things are very fluid. LSU's only objective is to get him to take a visit.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that matters.
Get him in the
follow
door.
the visits, follow the visits, and follow the visits. If he doesn't take a visit, he's not going to Baton Rouge to play for the Tigers. So there you go.
What's his timeline?
Nobody knows. That portal doesn't end until January 2nd. And from knowing Walter, it will be random. He is about as random as it gets. So I'm not even touching that with a 10-foot pole.
TBD.
Yes.
Another position group that we haven't talked about that I think wouldn't hurt, looking into the transfer portal, just bringing in a little bit more experience, is at the wide receiver position. You're losing most likely your top 2 receivers. Malik Nabers headed to the NFL draft. Not announced by Brian Thomas yet, but I have to assume Brian Thomas is going to the NFL draft. So you're losing your top 2 receivers. You bring back Kyron Lacey and Chris Hilton, and you could get some more out of those true freshmen that you didn't get anything from, Shelton Sampsons of that wide receiver room. But looking at a player like Will Shepard from Vanderbilt, who's from Mandeville, was Vanderbilt's leading receiver, and I know that's not saying a ton to say that you're Vanderbilt's leading receiver, but a guy like him or another receiver in the transfer portal, what do you make of LSU bringing in just a little bit more receiver depth?
How could you not try? Evan Stewart's where it's got to begin because he may go to the portal. Another
that feels inevitable, doesn't it?
No comment, but yeah, but yeah, he's pretty loose on that as well. Man, he's good though. He's really good.
He is,
and he's a Dallas kid. And if I remember right, Nussmeier played in Dallas, so I'm sure they know each other. And to be honest with you, if he enters the portal, LSU's a natural fit. If you're not going to stick in the state of Texas, move one state over. I would think LSU would have to be one of the favorites. Just saying. I know Alabama's been rumored and some others, but it'll be the big hitters. LSU should be right there.
For Evan Stewart?
Yeah, I mean, how would they not? I mean, they were recruiting him coming out of high school anyway. Yeah. So that's one to keep an eye on. There are several guys in the portal at receiver that are good, and that's a spot where there's a handful of guys that are already in the portal that are from schools you and I don't normally talk about.
Yeah.
But they ended up there. They were a little small out of high school. They got a little bigger, et cetera. And they're like, oh, they averaged 17 yards a catch. They had 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now LSU, now USC, now Oklahoma. Now there's LSU's going to end up with one of those kids. I don't know which one, but they'll get at least one of them. It's how hard is it to sell LSU's offense?
Not at all.
So
Not at all. I mean, look at what they did this past season. But here's my thing that I think I am cautious of, and I think a lot of LSU fans are cautious of. Of sometimes you find those Cinderella stories of players like you mentioned, under recruited, maybe undersized coming out of high school. They go to a smaller school and they absolutely flourish, find their spotlight on a bigger stage. And
yep.
it's a great story. But then we look at players that LSU brought in this past season that came from schools that don't have as of high of expectations, and so they just simply could not meet the expectations at LSU. And I'm talking about the cornerback position. I'm talking about you bringing in players from Syracuse and from Marshall, from southeastern Louisiana, that I think I wanted to, and a lot of LSU fans wanted to believe that those could be the Cinderella stories of players that just needed a new opportunity and a bigger opportunity. But what's the difference between that and the players that just simply cannot meet the talent level that's expected at LSU?
Coaching.
Yeah.
I think this, look, I didn't think it was a huge athletic problem in the secondary.
Mm-hmm. Coaching.
If it's not
Wrong
playing,
place, wrong time,
then it is coaching. So there was a disconnect that is amazingly large. You watched LSU, whether it was a running play, a screen, or traditional pass, how often were they physical in the secondary?
Never.
That was the first thing that I noticed. Like, it was weird. And Florida was the same way. Those are two of the best DB schools in the country. Neither one of them could tackle anybody. And they got all kinds of highly rated 4 and 5 star kids.
Yeah.
That doesn't compute. So that's a coaching disconnect with the players. And until that is fixed, what we're talking about with the transfer portal is secondary. And unfortunately, I don't know if you can do anything about it. Like you said, if they're going to make a decision with the coordinator after the, like officially, but a lot of what they're going to do, I think they're trying to ride with who they have based on what he's saying. Then they might, I mean, they'll, like, for instance, if Jair Brown wants to come, yeah, they're going to take a chance on him.
Yeah.
But by and large, we have to coach better because it's not who's here. We need to do better coaching.
It's not good enough. It is not good. I was watching the SEC championship game over the weekend. I had tackling envy. I was watching both Alabama and Georgia's defenses. I'm thinking, wow, you get a stop on an easy screenplay like that. Wow, you're able to make a tackle on the first try. I remember when my team used to do that. Last one for you, Brian. Not recruiting related, but you're dialed into the state of Florida football in the state of Florida. How mad is the city of Tallahassee?
Well, there's a thing going around in the state. They're getting ready to sue the committee allegedly, which
Wow.
I don't think that's going to work out very well.
Are there grounds for suing?
Lawyers are subjective by nature, so I think it's more posturing because there is no, I mean, it's opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll get thrown out, but
the fact that that's even now a possibility, that they're going to sue the College Football Playoff Committee, just shows how outraged people are. Rightfully so.
Well, I mean, I don't think Florida State should be in without a quarterback, but I understand. So I look at it from both perspectives, but I don't see how you're going to sue and win, though. I really don't. I think that's more politicians getting behind it to become long-term politicians.
I don't think it was right. If I was in the committee, I would have put Florida State in at 4. I'm not going to sue anyone over it, but football.
Yeah,
it's
well, some of my friends that are Florida State fans had said during the season that they didn't think Florida State had any chance of going to the playoff and doing anything anyway. But when they were left out, they were mad. Their tune changed. Like, it's too personal.
Yeah.
So I haven't had an objective conversation with anybody yet.
I don't think that there are many objective conversations that happen in college football spaces.
That is a very fair statement. Well said, Caroline. Well said.
Brian Smith, you're the absolute best, and we appreciate you and love you here over at Locked On LSU. Where can people find some more of your work?
At FB Scout _Florida. There's going to be a lot of transfer palooza, as it's been aptly called. I think by the end of this next weekend, a lot of the key dominoes will start to fall. I know a few behind the scenes. It's not official, but it's official. That'll come out, and that'll help because once the top dominoes fall, then some of the other kids we're talking about, like Jair Brown, etc., then the shift goes towards them. It'll be really fast about a week from now. You'll see names committing all over the place.
It's going to be a whirlwind. And
Yes,
on
it
top of
is.
that, we got a Heisman Trophy ceremony to pay attention to.
That's right.
So, Brian, appreciate you as always. We'll chat with you soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Caroline.
Appreciate it. Thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate Brian Smith for stopping by, breaking down all things transfer portal, and things change quickly. So we will have up-to-date information and updates coming up on future episodes of Locked On LSU. But coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, one thing that we've all been talking about, we talked about it with Brian today, the future of the defensive coaches. Is Matt House going to return? What Brian Kelly had to say about the future of his position coaches and when that evaluation may come, when decisions may come, what that means for this team. We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.